Our second argument, offered up in favor of oppositional substance dualism, essentially claims that it's manifestly obvious. In some sense, we can see it using our inner faculty of observation, introspection. Premise 1. Introspection reveals mental states and properties to the introspector in much the same way that vision reveals objects in the visual world. Premise 2. Introspection reveals that mental states have none of the properties of brains or brain states. Premise 3. Thus, direct observation seems to belie the claim that mental states and processes are simply physical states and properties. The difficulty with this argument has to do with the very assumptions that it makes about introspection. It assumes, as philosophers often do, that introspection is just like vision in that I can see the operations and qualities of my mental states, and I can do so with perfect reliability. Oftentimes, philosophers will say that introspection is unincorrigible, not subject to error, and so on. But these claims, in fact, are demonstrably empirically refuted. There have been numerous studies over a very long period of time that show that human beings' ability to make introspective judgments about the quality of their experiences and about the sorts of processes and information that they're using in making inferences or decisions is less than perfectly reliable. Significantly less than perfectly reliable. For example, people oftentimes can't distinguish between orange and lime sherbet. People can't distinguish between 2% and whole milk, but they report they can consistently. Similarly, there are many studies, and I mentioned some of them in the textbook, that show that information used to make decisions or that significantly influences inferences or behavior by individuals do not get reported by those individuals as information that they use. Similarly, this argument probably also suffers from a lack of clarity regarding whether or not introspection is subject to referential opacity. If I see someone from behind, I might mistake them for my friend. Vision is subject to a certain amount of referential opacity. How I see someone will determine how easy it is for me to judge who they are. Introspection is thought not to admit of such things, but it's not at all clear that that is true. We'll finish our survey of arguments supporting oppositional substance dualism's promise with the argument from special abilities or inabilities. Arguers of this stripe point to some ability, some capacity, some problem that human beings have solved. They look around at the past, perhaps, but mostly probably at the current context and introduce the second premise. If mental properties and abilities were just physical properties and abilities, then one would expect to find or to be able to create other physical systems that can, whatever that human ability, skill, property, or so on was. From that, they then conclude that since we do not see physical objects manifesting this, accomplishing this, and so on, humans must be mental in virtue of some other non-physical substance having some other non-physical properties. This argument has a structure going from a current state of affairs to making an in-principle claim about that ability or capacity. Arguments of this nature can be particularly problematic. Arguments of this structure are particularly prone to falling victim to appeals to ignorance. Human perceptions of possibility and impossibility are strongly constrained by context, by your worldview, by the current state of plays in the situation or the time that you're living in, by your perception of what other people expect or think is possible. For this reason, extrapolating from a current state of affairs to an in-principle claim is a particularly precarious inductive claim. And indeed, when we look at instances of this kind of argument in the context of, for instance, artificial intelligence, we can see that they do not fare too well. Descartes made his version of the argument regarding language. We can see things like computers that people never thought could beat grandmaster chess players that now do easily, or past Jeopardy champions without any difficulty whatsoever, or driving across the Baja Peninsula, or as Elon Musk would tell you, driving with a higher safety record statistically than the human driver behind the wheel would have if they were in control. Computers fly planes, they run trains, they drive cars, they do all sorts of things that people predicted they would never be able to do. And so it becomes extremely precarious to try and speculate about those limitations, even when we think there's no obvious way for a physical system to accomplish some particular task or to have some particular ability or experience.